Your Honor, my time is extremely valuable. My father has a luncheon with the governor's office at noon, and quite frankly, I have far better things to do than explain myself to a parking dispute court. Those were her first words to me, not hello, not good morning, not any kind of nod to the room she was standing in, just that, loud, smooth, and dripping with the kind of confidence that only comes from a life where every problem got fixed with a phone call and nobody ever said no. My name is Judge Frank Caprio. I sit on the bench at Providence Municipal Court. I have been doing this work for a long time, decades. I have seen thousands of people walk through that door, young and old, rich and poor, proud and broken, scared and angry. I have seen every kind of person this city has to offer. But every now and then, not often mind you, but sometimes, someone walks into this courtroom and they do not just test the rules. They test everything I believe in, about justice, about fairness, about what it means to be a decent human being in this world. That morning, the person testing all of that was a young woman named Brianna Hargrove. She was 24 years old, straight blonde hair that looked like it had been styled the way some people style wedding cakes. Precise, expensive, untouchable. She wore a cream-colored blazer with no wrinkles. Her nails were pale pink. Her shoes, I noticed them the moment she walked in, were Louboutin, red soles, the kind of shoes that cost more than a month's rent for most families in this city. She walked toward the defendant's table like she was doing us a favor, slow, deliberate, like every step was a gift the courtroom should appreciate. Her attorney, a well-groomed man named Preston Aldridge, someone I recognized from other high-profile cases, walked 2 steps behind her, already flipping through papers with that look lawyers get when they know the case is harder than their client thinks it is. And then I looked to the other side of the room, sitting quietly, hands folded, a cane resting against his right knee, a small American flag pin on the lapel of a plain gray jacket. Marcus Delray, 42 years old, former Staff Sergeant, United States Army, 2 tours in Iraq, a man who carried a prosthetic leg brace on his right side, the result of an IED blast in Fallujah in 2007. An IED is a roadside bomb, in case you don't know that word, a device designed to kill. It killed 2 of the men beside him that day. It took the full use of his right leg. And still, after all of that, Marcus Delray sat in my courtroom with a straight back and quiet eyes, and a patience that people with real strength always seem to carry. He did not look angry. He just looked tired. The kind of tired that has nothing to do with sleep. If you believe that a uniform, earned in blood and sacrifice and years of service, deserves more respect than a family name on a campaign poster, then stay right here with me. Because what happens in this courtroom today is something you are going to want to witness from start to finish. Before I go any further, if this story is already stirring something in your chest, hit that like button right now. Trust me when I tell you that what comes next will stay with you. I promise you that. Act 1. The setup Officer Tomlin, my bailiff, a steady and dependable man who has stood in this room for 11 years, called the case clearly and without any theater. Case number 2026 TR 4471, the State of Rhode Island versus Brianna Lynn Hargrove. Charges before the court today include reckless vehicle operation resulting in significant property damage, physical assault upon a person with a documented physical disability, and obstruction of a lawful police investigation. I looked down at my file. I read it once. Then I looked up at both sides of the room and I said, "Good morning. Let us begin." Brianna gave a half nod. Preston Aldridge offered me a smile, the kind of smile that is really a negotiating tactic in disguise. And Marcus Delray looked at me and said simply, in a voice that was low and even, "Good morning, Your Honor." 2 words, that is all. But those 2 words had more weight in them than everything else that had been said in this room since the doors opened. I always start by making sure I fully understand who is in front of me. Not just the papers, not just the charges, the people. So I turned to Marcus first. I asked him to tell me, in his own words, without a lawyer doing it for him, exactly what happened on the morning in question. I told him to take his time. He cleared his throat. He straightened slightly in his seat, and he spoke. I was parked outside the VA clinic on Warfield Avenue, Your Honor. I had a 9 a.m. therapy appointment, PTSD counseling. I have been going every other Thursday for about 3 years now. I have a condition, post-traumatic stress disorder, and permanent nerve damage in my right leg from a blast injury in Fallujah. My appointment ran a little late. I came out to the parking lot at around 10:15 in the morning. That is when I found it. He paused for just a moment. My truck, I drive a dark blue pickup, had the entire rear bumper caved in. The left tail light was completely shattered. There was white paint on my bumper. My truck is dark blue. It was hit while I was inside, and whoever hit it did not leave a note. He said all of this without drama, without performance. Just a man laying out the facts, the same careful way a person lays bricks, one at a time, straight and solid. I was about to call my wife, he continued, and then I looked around the parking lot. 3 spaces down from mine, there was a white Range Rover. It had a fresh dent in the front right corner, and there was dark blue paint on its front bumper. He stopped. I recognized it right away. Blue on white, white on blue. That was my truck's paint on her car. I said, "And what did you do next?" He said, "I walked over. The window was up. I knocked, politely. She rolled it down. I said, and I want to be exact here, I said, 'Excuse me, ma'am. I think you may have hit my truck when you were pulling out. Could we exchange insurance information?' And she looked at me. She looked at my leg brace. She looked at my cane. And then she said, 'Oh, relax. It's just a small dent. Call your VA or whoever handles your little benefits. I'm sure the government will fix it for you.'" The gallery stirred, not loudly, more like a room full of people drawing in air at the same time. I kept my face still. I've spent many years training my face to stay still in moments like this, but inside something tightened, something that felt like a door closing on a very important choice. I looked at Brianna. I said quietly, "Miss Hargrove, you will have your opportunity to respond. Please be patient." She glanced at me, and she did something small that I will not forget. She rolled her eyes, not a dramatic eye roll, not a teenager's exaggerated performance, just a tiny, lazy flicker of the eyes, like the instruction I had just given her was beneath her attention. I noted it. I moved on. Marcus told me the rest. He said he asked again, politely, he said that word twice, for her insurance information. That she refused. That she said, "I am not giving you anything. Do you know who my father is?" That when Marcus told her he would be calling the police, she opened the car door. She stepped out. She walked toward him, and she shoved him in the chest with both hands. "I don't have great balance on my right side," he said. His voice stayed even. "Because of the leg, the shove caught me off balance. I went down, hit the asphalt. I scraped both palms. When I landed, I twisted my right knee, the damaged one. I was on the ground for about 2 full minutes before I could get myself back up." She stood over me the entire time. She never reached down. She never asked if I was okay. She just looked at me from above and said, "You are being so dramatic right now." The room was silent. I looked at this man for a long moment. 42 years old, 2 tours in Iraq, an IED that took 2 teammates and damaged his leg forever, a man who drives himself to a VA clinic every other Thursday because he refuses to stop trying, and a 24-year-old woman had shoved him in a parking lot and stood over him and called it drama. I turned back to the defense table. I said, "Miss Hargrove, how does your client plead, Mr. Aldridge?" Preston Aldridge was on his feet before I finished the sentence. He spoke in that smooth, even tone that experienced attorneys use when they are trying to make something complicated sound simple. He said his client was entering a plea of not guilty on all charges, that this was a regrettable misunderstanding, that his client had no intention of causing harm, and that the charges, in his exact words, represented a significant and troubling overreach by the prosecution. I looked at him. I said, "We will let the evidence make that determination." He sat down. "If what you just heard is already making your blood pressure rise, if you are sitting there thinking, 'No, that cannot be all there is,' then subscribe right now, because this story has not even found its feet yet. The worst is still coming, and so is the justice." Act 2, the escalation. Let me tell you about the first confrontation. It happened about 15 minutes into the hearing. I had asked Officer Tomlin to enter the police photographs into the record. These were photos taken at the scene on the day of the incident by Officer Dana Reyes of the Providence Police Department, who had responded to Marcus's 911 call approximately 22 minutes after it was placed. The photos were clear. The first set showed Marcus's truck. The rear bumper was buckled and twisted. The left tail light was gone, just broken plastic and exposed wiring where the light used to be. A long, deep gouge ran along the lower panel, exposing raw metal. There was a clear smear of white paint along the blue surface. The second set showed the Range Rover. The front right corner had a crumple in it, not catastrophic, but unmistakable. And there, on the front bumper of Brianna's white vehicle, was a transfer of dark blue paint. Exact shade, exact position, a fingerprint of guilt. The third photograph, and in this one I held for a moment before I set it down, showed the parking lot from a wider angle, and in the corner of the frame you could see Marcus, sitting on the ground, his cane about 3 feet away from him, his palms visible, scraped and raw, his leg brace clearly visible, sitting alone on hot asphalt while the Range Rover sat running just a few parking spaces away. I set the photos down on the bench. I said, "Miss Hargrove, these photographs document paint transfer consistent with direct contact between your vehicle and Mr. Delray's vehicle. Do you dispute that?" Preston Aldridge started to stand. Brianna put her hand on his forearm and pressed a small, firm motion that said, "Sit down. I have this." She looked at me. Her voice was cool and unbothered. She said, "I may have tapped his truck slightly when I was backing out. The lot was crowded. I did not feel a significant impact. I genuinely did not believe I had caused any meaningful damage. It seemed like a non-issue at the time." I let that word hang in the air for a second. A non-issue. I said, "Mr. Delray, did you bring the repair estimate with you today?" Marcus reached into the plain manila folder he had placed on the table when he arrived. He pulled out a single printed sheet and passed it to Officer Tomlin, who walked it to my bench. I picked it up. I read the number at the bottom. I said, "This is a repair estimate from Riverside Auto Body on Federal Hill, dated 3 days after the incident. The total for parts and labor comes to $4,380. I held the sheet up so the room could see it. "Miss Hargrove, is $4,380 a non-issue?" She did not flinch. She said, "My father's insurance team will handle it." I said, "That is not what I asked you." She said nothing. I leaned forward slightly. I said, "Miss Hargrove, in this courtroom, in my courtroom, non-issue means something specific. It means something that causes no harm, something that leaves every person involved unaffected and undamaged. Now, I'm asking you to look at that photograph. Look at the one with Mr. Delray on the ground, and tell me with a straight face, is that man sitting alone on hot asphalt with scraped hands and a twisted knee a non-issue?" She turned her head, not toward Marcus, away from the photograph. As though the question required less attention than she was already giving it, I wrote in my notes 3 words. I will not tell you what they were, but I wrote them. That was the first confrontation. Sharp, cold, and revealing. The second one came about 10 minutes later, and it was worse. Prosecutor Donna Harwell, a woman I have known for a long time and whose preparation in a courtroom I have always respected, stood up and asked the court to enter evidence number 2, text messages. Now I want to explain how these messages came to be part of the court record. When Officer Reyes filed his police report on the day of the incident, he noted something unusual. Approximately 20 minutes after he arrived at the scene and began taking statements, he received a phone call. The call came from an office number registered to the staff of Congressman Gerald Hargrove, Brianna's father. The caller identified himself as a member of the congressman's team and asked Officer Reyes to, quote, "exercise discretion when completing your report today." That is a polished phrase. What it means, as in plain language, is go easy, leave some things out, let this one go. Officer Reyes did not go easy. He did not let it go. He filed a complete and accurate report, and he documented the call. That documentation triggered a secondary investigation during which Brianna's phone records were lawfully obtained, and in those records were the text messages. Prosecutor Harwell read them aloud. First message, sent to a contact labeled Kells, 47 minutes after the incident. Some random veteran called the cops on me. I tapped his truck a little. He literally fell over when I pushed him, LOL. So embarrassing for him, honestly. Second message, sent 11 minutes later. Not worried. Daddy's on it already. This is going away by tonight. These things always do. Third message, sent approximately 1 hour after the incident. I honestly have zero patience for people like that. He walks around like he deserves a parade for joining the army. Newsflash, my tax dollars pay for his benefits and his therapy. He should be thanking people like us, not calling the police. The gallery did not erupt. It did something quieter and more powerful than that. It went still. The kind of still that means everyone in the room just felt the same thing at the exact same moment. A woman near the back of the gallery put her hand to her mouth. Not dramatically, just a quiet, involuntary gesture. I looked at Marcus Delray. He was staring straight ahead. His jaw was tight. He blinked once. Then, he was still again. The way a person gets still when they have practiced being still because the alternative costs too much. I turned to Brianna. She was examining the edge of her thumbnail. I said slowly and clearly, Miss Hargrove, are you aware that those text messages were just read aloud in this courtroom? She looked up. She said, I believe private communications between friends should have, I said, in a court of law, once a matter reaches this bench, the concept of private communication is governed by the law, not by personal preference. Are you clear on that? Preston Aldridge said, Your Honor, we would like to note for the record. I said, Mr. Aldridge, I was speaking to your client. He closed his mouth. She said, Fine. Yes, I understand. I said, Good. We will continue. That was the second confrontation, and I want to be honest with you. After hearing those messages, there was not a single person in that courtroom who did not already understand exactly who Brianna Hargrove was. The evidence had painted a portrait, and it was not a flattering one, but the third confrontation, the third one was different. Wait, stop right here, take a breath, because I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened next. Everything that came before, the arrogance, the eye roll, the shrug, the text messages, all of it was just the warm-up. What I'm about to tell you is the reason this case stayed with me. Share this with someone before you read the next line, because what she says next changed everything in that room, including me. Prosecutor Harwell stood once more. She said there was a third piece of evidence, video, a woman named Patricia Voss, a 61-year-old retired pediatric nurse who had been sitting in her parked car in the same VA clinic lot that morning, waiting for her husband to finish his own appointment, had been watching the incident unfold from the moment Brianna's Range Rover struck Marcus's truck. Patricia Voss had pulled out her phone and begun recording. She recorded for 3 minutes and 58 seconds. She had turned that footage over to Officer Reyes voluntarily, without being asked. The recording was played on the courtroom display screen. The whole room watched. You could see Marcus clearly, his face, his cane, the way he walked carefully across the lot. You could see him stop when he saw the damage to his truck. You could see him look at the Range Rover. You could see him approach. You could see his hand knock on the window. You could see the window come down. The audio was not perfect, but it was clear enough. You could hear Brianna's voice say, It's just a dent. Call your benefits people. You could see Marcus shake his head slowly and ask again for insurance information. And then, and this part the entire courtroom watched without making a sound, you could see Brianna open her door. You could see her step out. You could see her walk toward Marcus. You could see her hands go up. You could see the shove. And you could see Marcus fall. What happened next is what stayed with me. On the video, you could see Brianna standing over Marcus, who was on the ground, his cane away from him, his hands on the asphalt. She was standing upright, not reaching down, not calling for help, just standing, and she pointed at him, and in that terrible, clear, irreversible way that video captures things, you could hear her say, "This is why people don't respect veterans anymore. You people walk around like the whole world owes you a trophy just for showing up. The courtroom was silent. Not a single sound, not a chair scrape, not a cough, nothing. 10 full seconds of complete silence, and then, slowly, like pressure building behind a dam, the gallery began to react. Someone near the back said, "Lord, have mercy," under their breath. Someone else said, "Did she really just—" and stopped. I heard a chair move. I heard a sharp exhale near the front row. I looked at Marcus Delray. His eyes were wet, not tears running down his face, not yet, just that wet stillness that comes right before. He was looking at the table in front of him. His hands, which had been folded and calm and steady the entire morning, had slowly closed themselves into two quiet, careful fists. I looked at Preston Aldridge. For the first time since he walked in, he looked frightened, not nervous, frightened, the way a man looks when he realizes the vehicle he has been driving just left the road. And then I looked at Brianna Hargrove. She was still sitting with her chin tilted, still looking like she was in a waiting room somewhere unimportant. And I watched her face on the screen as the video finished, and I watched her face in the room. And I could see that even now, even after all of this, she did not fully understand what she had done. I said, "Miss Hargrove, is that your voice on that recording?" Preston Aldridge stood immediately. I held up one finger, very slowly, and I kept my eyes on Brianna. She looked at the screen, which had gone dark. She looked at me, and then, and I want you to understand that what happened next crossed a line that very few people have ever crossed in my courtroom. She shrugged, one shoulder, casual, like I had asked her if she wanted cream in her coffee, and then she spoke. And what she said is the reason this case is what it is. She looked me directly in both eyes. She said, "Your Honor, I will be very honest with you since we are all wasting so much time here. That man is a liability. He chose that life. No one drafted him. He volunteered, he collected his benefits, and now he wants to collect again from a parking lot tap. My father has done more meaningful work for veterans in a single budget session than that man will contribute in his entire lifetime. I did not come here today to be lectured on respect. My family has personally funded programs that keep half the services in this city running. That man receives a government stipend every month. He gets free therapy. He gets benefits I help pay for with my taxes. And I am supposed to lower my head and apologize to him? I do not think so. And if this court continues to treat me as though I am on the same level as someone collecting government assistance, then perhaps my father needs to have a very different conversation about the budget for this courthouse specifically by Monday morning. The viral moment, 10 seconds. That is exactly how long the silence lasted after she finished speaking. I know because I counted them, one by one, inside my head, because that is what I do when something hits me so hard that I need a moment to be certain that I am going to respond correctly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. The gallery did not react, not yet. They were still processing, still translating what they had just heard into something their minds could hold. 6, 7, 8. I looked at Marcus Delray. The wetness in his eyes had not changed, but something else had. Something in his posture, in the set of his shoulders and the line of his jaw, had changed. He had the expression of a man who had just heard something he already knew in his bones, but had never heard said out loud so plainly. Like a wound he had carried for years, suddenly having a name. 9, 10. And then the gallery came alive. Not loud, not chaotic. Something more powerful than chaos. A deep, collective sound that came from every corner of the room at once. I heard Lord, I heard no, she didn't. I heard someone press both hands flat on the bench in front of them. I heard a woman near the middle say, very quietly, to nobody in particular, "She just threatened a judge." Preston Aldridge had gone completely white. He was staring at the table in front of him. He was not writing, he was not speaking. He looked like a man sitting very still in a falling elevator. My face did not change. I have spent a long time, a very long time, training my face not to show what my heart is doing in moments like this. But inside, something had drawn a line, a very clear line, an absolutely permanent line. I set my pen down on the bench. I folded my hands in front of me. I breathed in once, slowly, and then I looked at Brianna Hargrove. I said, "Miss Hargrove, like this video right now, right this second. If you believe that no last name, no checkbook, no political connection, and no family title gives a single living person the right to look at a war veteran and call him a liability, not in my courtroom, not anywhere on this earth, press that like button, because justice is coming, and it will not be quiet." Act 3, The Reckoning. Miss Hargrove. I said her name quietly, not with volume, not with theater, just quietly, because in my experience the truest things do not need to be shouted. "I want you to look at me. Look at me." She looked at me. "I have sat in this chair for a long time. I have heard many things said in this room, people who were frightened, people who were sorry, people who were confused about how they ended up where they ended up. I have heard people who were guilty pretend to be innocent, and people who were innocent cry because no one believed them. I have heard it all." I paused. "But I need you to hear me now, Miss Hargrove. Not your attorney, not your father's office, me. Because what just happened in this courtroom is not something we are going to move past quickly." I looked at my notes, then back at her. "You used the word liability. You looked at a man sitting right across from you, and you called him a liability. Now, I want to be clear about what that word means, because words matter in this room. A liability is a burden, a loss, something that takes more than it gives. A deficit, that is what you called Marcus Delray." I turned and looked directly at Marcus for a moment, then I turned back to her. "Mr. Delray enlisted in the United States Army at the age of 22. He volunteered, as you correctly noted. Nobody forced him. He raised his right hand. He made a promise to this country. He kept it. He served 2 tours in the Middle East. He was part of operations in Fallujah, Iraq, a city that was, at the time, one of the most dangerous places on the surface of this planet. On his second tour, a roadside bomb, an IED, detonated near his vehicle. 2 of the men beside him did not survive. Mr. Delray survived with permanent nerve damage to his right leg, fragments in his lower back, and post-traumatic stress disorder that he has been managing, with professionalism and dignity, ever since." I let that land. "He did not ask for those injuries, Miss Hargrove. He did not apply for them. They were the price of a choice he made, a choice that most 22-year-olds in this city never have to make. He chose to go. He chose to serve. And he came home changed, the way all of them come home changed, carrying things that people who were not there cannot fully understand." I looked directly at her. "And then one morning he walked to his car after a therapy appointment, after working again on the things that war put inside him, and he found it damaged. He handled it calmly. He approached you without aggression. He asked politely, and you shoved him to the ground, and you stood over him and told him the world does not owe him respect. I let that settle. Miss Hargrove, the benefits that Mr. Delray receives, the therapy, the disability support, those are not charity. I want you to understand this clearly. Those benefits exist because this country made a promise. We said, if you go, and if you are broken by what you find there, we will not abandon you. We owe you that. The benefits are not a gift, they are a debt. This country owes Marcus Delray, and the people who went before him, and the people who will come after him. They are owed. And calling that debt a handout, in my courtroom, to my face, in front of that man, is something I will not allow to stand without response. I noticed that Preston Aldridge had stopped taking notes. He had set his pen on the table. He was just sitting there, listening. Even he understood, at this point, that there was nothing left to argue. You also said, Miss Hargrove, that your father has done more for veterans in one budget meeting than Mr. Delray has done in his lifetime. I want to address that directly. Your father holds an important office. I respect that office. Legislating, that is, making laws and setting budgets, is real and necessary work. I do not dismiss it. But writing a number in a budget document is not the same thing as lying in the dirt outside Fallujah while the men beside you are dying. It is not the same thing. Those are 2 different categories of service, And if you genuinely believe they are equal, then you have been taught something that is going to cause you a great deal of difficulty in life, and apparently already has. I leaned forward. And then, Miss Hargrove, then you made a threat. You told this court that perhaps your father needs to have a very different conversation about the funding of this courthouse by Monday morning. I want to be the clearest I have ever been with anyone in this room. That statement means nothing to me, not one word of it. This bench is not subject to financial pressure. It is not influenced by political office. It is not rented. It is not bought. It is not negotiated. The moment someone in this room, anyone, attempts to use wealth or power or access to bend what happens here, that is precisely the moment when this bench becomes absolutely unmovable. I looked at her. Her chin was no longer tilted. Her jaw was tight. Something was working behind her eyes, something that had not been there an hour ago. Miss Hargrove, I am going to ask you one question. I want you to take your time with it. Look at Marcus Delray. Look at him. Not through him, not past him. At him. This man who chose service. This man who fell in a parking lot because you pushed him. This man who has sat in this room for 2.5 hours, quiet, dignified, patient, while you made it perfectly clear what you believe him to be worth. Look at him, and tell me, is there anything at all, that you feel? The room was completely still. Brianna turned her head. For the first time since she walked into this courtroom, she looked at Marcus Delray. Really looked. Her eyes moved across his face, his cane, his hands, the small flag on his lapel. She looked at him the way a person looks at something they have been avoiding for a long time. Her lips pressed together. Her chin dropped slightly. She said nothing. And I said softly, that silence right there, is the first truly honest thing you have offered this courtroom all morning. I see you right now. I feel this room through you. If you are with me, if you believe that dignity is not a prize awarded to the wealthy, but a right that belongs to every person who draws breath, drop a like and subscribe. Because thousands of people are watching this story right now, you are not alone, and justice is not done yet. Act 4, the sentencing. I straightened in my chair, I looked at my notes, then I looked up. Miss Hargrove, I am going to address each charge before this court today. I want you to listen carefully to every word. I want you to write nothing down. I want you to just listen. I started at the beginning. The vehicle damage charge. You struck Mr. Delray's truck while operating your vehicle in a parking lot. You were aware that contact had been made. You chose not to report it. You chose not to leave a note. You chose not to acknowledge it when directly confronted. The resulting damage has been independently assessed at $4,380. You will pay that amount to Mr. Delray in full. Payment is to be received within 60 days of today. In addition to the repair cost, I am assessing a court fine of $2,500, reflective of the deliberate nature of your avoidance and the contemptuous manner in which you handled the confrontation. Your total financial obligation on this charge is $6,880. If this amount is not received in full within 60 days, a lien will be filed against your personal assets. That means this court has the legal right to take what it is owed from property that belongs to you. That is not a suggestion. That is the law of this state. I let that land. Then I moved on. The physical assault charge. You pushed a man with a documented physical disability. He fell. He was injured. He lay on hot pavement while you stood over him and told him he was being dramatic. For this charge, I am suspending your driver's license for a period of 18 months, effective immediately. You will not operate any motor vehicle in the state of Rhode Island for the next 1.5 years. If you are found driving during this suspension, you will face criminal charges in addition to what this court has already ordered. I looked at her carefully. In addition to the license suspension, I am ordering 40 hours of community service, and I am going to be very precise about what those hours look like. Preston Aldridge shifted in his seat. You will complete your community service at the Providence Veterans Outreach Center, located on Halstead Avenue, 2 miles from this courthouse. You will report every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. sharp. You will assist the coordination staff with transportation logistics, which means you will help schedule and arrange rides for veterans who need transportation to and from their medical appointments. You will do this because it is directly and deliberately connected to your offense. You pushed a man who was trying to get to his appointment. You will now spend 40 Saturdays making sure that other veterans get to theirs. The center director will supervise and evaluate you. You will submit a weekly written report to this court. You will arrive on time. You will not leave early. You will not reference your family name, your father's position, or your financial standing to anyone at that center, not to the staff, not to the veterans, not to anyone. If you do, the center director is instructed to inform this court immediately, and you will return to my bench for additional sentencing. A sound moved through the gallery, not laughter, something more serious, the sound of people recognizing that the punishment fits, that it is not random, that it is connected to the specific wound that was caused. In addition to the community service, I am ordering a handwritten letter of apology to be submitted to this court within 14 days, not typed, not drafted by Mr. Aldridge, written by your hand, in your own words, addressed to Mr. Marcus Delray. It will not contain legal language. It will not include conditions or disclaimers. It will be a genuine acknowledgement, in plain words, of what you did, what you said, and what you understand about why it was wrong. I will read it personally before it is delivered. If it reads like a form letter, if it sounds like a document designed to satisfy a legal requirement rather than speak to a human being, I will send it back and you will write it again, and again, until it is real. I paused. I looked directly at her. You will also complete a 2-hour educational session at the Rhode Island Veterans Affairs Trauma and Recovery Program within 30 days of today. This session is led by VA counselors and includes testimonials from veterans living with PTSD and physical disabilities. You will sit, you will listen, you will not speak unless asked a direct question. A certificate of completion will be submitted to this court no later than 30 days from today's date. This condition is not optional and it is not negotiable. I move to the obstruction charge. The phone call placed from your father's office to a responding officer is a matter of record in this case. Your father is not before this court today, but the culture that made that call feel like an appropriate response. The belief that this situation should and would go away by tonight, that culture is reflected in your own communications, your own behavior, and your own words in this room. The obstruction charge carries an additional fine of $1,500 to be paid to the State of Rhode Island Judicial Integrity Fund. This case will remain under court monitoring for a period of 6 months. At the 60-day mark and at the 6-month mark, this court will receive compliance reports. If any single condition I have ordered is not being met, you will return to this bench. At that point, the conversation will be considerably more serious. I set down my notes. Now, the contempt. I watched the word land on her. It landed. For the first time all morning, I saw Brianna Hargrove's composure actually crack, not dramatically, just a small, real fracture, like a fine china cup that has been tapped in exactly the right spot. Your statement to this court, that your father may need to have a conversation about funding for this courthouse, constitutes direct contempt of court. Contempt means you have deliberately challenged the authority and integrity of this institution. That is a serious matter. I do not take it lightly, and I will not treat it lightly. I said, Officer Tomlin. The bailiff stepped forward. Brianna's chin dropped. The last fraction of performance fell away. I said, Ms. Hargrove, you are remanded to custody for a period of 48 hours. You will be processed and held at the Dockside Detention Center. You will appear before me Thursday morning at 9 a.m. for a compliance and review hearing. At that hearing, I will assess whether you have demonstrated a genuine understanding of the gravity of what occurred here today. If I am satisfied, you will be released to complete the full terms I have outlined. If I am not satisfied, we will have a much longer and more serious conversation. The handcuffs clicked. Quiet, efficient, final. Preston Aldridge was on his feet immediately. He was talking about appeals and due process and procedural concerns. I told him calmly that his client would be available to him Thursday morning, and that in the meantime, his most productive use of time would be preparing her to come before me with a different understanding of where she stands. He sat down. Brianna Hargrove walked out of my courtroom in handcuffs. Cream blazer, red-soled shoes, hands behind her back. I watched until the door closed behind her, and then I turned to Marcus Delray. He was standing, his cane in his right hand. His eyes were dry now, steady, calm. He looked like a man who had stood in harder places than this and had survived them all. I said, "Mr. Delray, the court thanks you for your service to this country and for your patience and dignity in this proceeding today. I am sorry that it required a courtroom to deliver what you were owed from the moment this began." He nodded slowly. He said, "Thank you, Your Honor." 2 words, as always, but this time they had the weight of every morning he had driven himself to that VA clinic, every Thursday that had cost him something and he had gone anyway. Those 2 words carried all of that. This is the moment this story turned. But subscribe before you read what came next, because what happened over the following weeks is the part that I still think about when I sit at my bench and wonder if any of this work means what I believe it means. Act 5, The Aftermath. 6 weeks after that hearing, I received the first written progress report from the Providence Veterans Outreach Center. The director of the center, a woman named Claudette Monroe, who has run that facility for over 15 years and who I consider one of the most credible human beings I know, submitted a brief but detailed assessment of Brianna's first 4 weeks of service. I read it at my desk on a Wednesday afternoon. Director Monroe wrote, "Ms. Hargrove arrived for her first Saturday shift 11 minutes before her required start time. She did not announce herself with her last name. She did not ask for special consideration. She was quiet. She followed instructions. During her first shift, she assisted in coordinating transportation for 9 veterans who had medical appointments that week, including 2 who had previously missed their appointments due to a lack of available rides. She used the center's scheduling system without complaint. She kept her phone put away. At the end of the shift, as she was preparing to leave, one of our regulars, a 71-year-old man named Thomas, who comes in every week for dialysis appointments, stopped her by the door. He said, 'Good work today. Same time next Saturday.' She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, 'Yes, sir.' I read that last line 3 times. 'Yes, sir.' I have been doing this long enough to know not to judge too quickly. I have seen people perform good behavior for a court record and then return to exactly who they were the moment the monitoring period ended. That happens. Transformation is hard, and it does not always hold, but there is sometimes a detail in a progress report, something tiny and unplanned and unrehearsed, that carries the fingerprint of something real. Yes, sir, to a 71-year-old man with dialysis appointments, that was the detail. By her 4th week, Director Monroe noted that Brianna had committed the names of 14 regular veterans to memory. She greeted them by name when they arrived. She had, without being asked, stayed 90 minutes past the end of her shift to help a Vietnam-era veteran named Harold, 73 years old, slow reader, struggling with paperwork, work through a medical reimbursement form that had been confusing him for 3 months. She sat beside him. She went through it line by line. She got it submitted. On week 7, which was 3 weeks beyond the original court-ordered 40 hours, she was still showing up, every Saturday, 8 a.m., not because the court required it anymore, because she had become, in some small and early way, part of something. The handwritten apology letter arrived at this courthouse on the 11th day, 3 days ahead of my deadline. It was 2 pages, written in clear, unhurried handwriting. I am not going to reproduce it here in full, but there was one line that I want to share, because it is the line that told me something had genuinely shifted. She wrote, "I said things I cannot take back. I know that. I am not asking you to forgive me, and I would not blame you if you never did. I just want you to know, with no lawyer involved in this sentence, that I know I was wrong, not only about what I did in that parking lot, about what I believed about you before I even met you, about what I thought your life was worth. I was wrong, and I am sorry." She completed the VA trauma and recovery session on day 26. The certificate arrived at my chambers the following morning. Alongside it, not required and not requested, was a brief personal note addressed to me. It said 4 words. "I didn't know. I do now. Final scene and the moral. After the Thursday compliance hearing, after I looked at Brianna Hargrove one more time, heard what I needed to hear, and released her to complete the terms of her sentencing, I went back to my chambers. I sat for a few minutes before the next case was called. I thought about Marcus Delray. I thought about that parking lot, about a man who walked out of a therapy appointment, an appointment he drove himself to because he refuses to give up, and found his truck destroyed and his good faith shoved into the ground. About a man who had been in Fallujah, who had held his teammates as they died, who had learned to walk differently and sleep differently and carry the weight of things that most people in this city will never be asked to carry. And I thought about a 24-year-old woman who had been given so much money, so much access, so much protection from consequence, that she had reached her mid-20s without ever once being forced to look at the world through any set of eyes but her own. I thought about what the courtroom looked like in that moment of silence after she spoke, the way it felt, the way Marcus's hands tightened into fists without him making a sound, the way the gallery held its breath, the way Preston Aldridge set down his pen. And I thought about what I believe, which has not changed in all the years I have sat at this bench. I believe that justice is not a favor. It is not a service that wealthy people receive and poor people petition for. It is not something that bends toward campaign donors or backs away from political pressure. It is a room that everyone walks into equally, and in that room, the only thing that matters is the truth and what is right. I believe that service, real service, the kind that costs you something real, the kind you cannot take back, is never a burden on the people around you. It is a gift to all of us, and the people who gave it are owed, not pity, not charity, not awkward parades. They are owed dignity, plain and simple, every day, in every parking lot, in every courtroom, in every conversation. I believe that what you carry in your heart matters more than what you carry in your wallet. And I believe that the moment a person stops being able to look at another human being and feel something, anything, is the moment they have lost something far more valuable than money.